General Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. His purple skin gleamed under the ship's lights, and his forearms moved with practiced grace as he reviewed reports on his datapad. The Crimson Talon was the pride of the Zephyrian fleet, a ship that had conquered 12 worlds and brought glory to the Empire. Behind him, his son Veltar approached with careful steps. The young officer's movements showed respect and fear in equal measure. At only 30 cycles old, Veltar was still learning the ways of command under his father's watchful eyes. "Father, the prisoner has been secured in Detention Cell 7, Veltar reported, his voice steady despite his nervousness. Kethvar turned to face his son, his black eyes studying the younger alien's face. "Good. Tell me about this human creature." The IAAJ scouts captured it near the asteroid mining station in the Outer Rim. It calls itself Jake Morrison. The creature appears to be a worker of some kind, not a soldier. It was operating heavy machinery when our forces arrived. "Just one of them?" "Yes, Father. It was alone on a small mining vessel. The ship was primitive, by our standards, but functional. The human offered no resistance when captured." Kethvar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Of course it didn't resist. These Earth creatures are new to space travel. They probably think we are gods." He walked closer to the viewing window, his reflection staring back at him. The other species in the council chambers speak of Earth as a death world. They claim its inhabitants are dangerous. Foolish talk from weak races who fear their own shadows. Veltar shifted uncomfortably. "Father," the Krillian ambassador seemed quite serious about the warnings. He said Earth's environment would kill most aliens within hours. "The Krillians are cowards who surrender at the first sign of conflict," Kethvar replied with disgust. "They see danger in everything because they are weak. We Zephyrians have conquered half this sector of space. What threat could a single world pose to us?" The general turned back to his son, his expression becoming serious. "This prisoner presents us with an opportunity, Veltar. You will interrogate the creature and learn about Earth's defenses. Consider it part of your training." "Yes, Father. What methods should I use?" "Standard procedures. Apply pressure, create discomfort, make threats. These primitive beings will break quickly once they understand their situation. The human will tell us everything about their military capabilities, their technology, and their weaknesses." Veltar nodded, but something in his father's confidence bothered him. The reports from the outer colonies had mentioned strange things about humans. They worked in environments that would kill most species. They seemed to enjoy activities that resembled combat training. Their entertainment involved watching other humans fight each other for sport. "What if the creature proves more resistant than expected?" Veltar asked. Kethvar's laugh filled the bridge again. "Then you will learn creative ways to apply pressure. Pain is universal, son. Fear exists in all living beings. Find what frightens the human and you will control it." The general walked to his command chair, settling his large frame into the seat. "Remember, this is not just about gathering information. This is about understanding your enemy. The humans will eventually pose a threat to our expansion plans. We must know how to defeat them when the time comes." "Do you think they will resist our rule?" "All species resist at first, but they learn to accept Zephyrian superiority once they understand the alternative. These humans will be no different. Their planet may be harsh by some standards, but they have never faced the might of a true military force." Veltar bowed his head. "I will not disappoint you, Father. See that you don't. Begin the interrogation tomorrow. I want results within a week." As Veltar left the bridge, Kethvar returned his attention to the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, a small blue world that other species whispered about in fearful tones. The general had read the reports from scientific expeditions. Earth's gravity was strong, its weather violent, and its wildlife aggressive. But these facts only proved that humans would make excellent slaves once properly broken. The Zephyrian Empire had faced many challenges over the centuries. They had fought species with superior technology, others with greater numbers, and some with natural advantages like flight or enhanced strength. In every case, Zephyrian discipline and strategy had won the day. Humans would be no different. Kethvar touched a control on his chair, and a holographic display appeared showing Earth's solar system. The third planet looked insignificant compared to the gas giants surrounding it. How could such a small world produce anything capable of threatening his empire? The prisoner, Jake Morrison, was probably terrified right now. Locked in an alien ship, surrounded by beings he couldn't understand, facing a future he couldn't predict. By tomorrow, Veltar would begin the process of breaking the human spirit. Within days, they would know everything about Earth's defenses, its military structure, and its weaknesses. Other alien races spoke of humans with something approaching respect, even fear. They claimed that surviving on Earth required incredible toughness and adaptability, but Kethvar knew better. Survival was one thing, warfare was another entirely. The Zephyrians had spent centuries perfecting the art of conquest. They understood strategy, logistics, and the psychology of defeat. The general smiled as he imagined future victories. Earth would fall like so many worlds before it. The humans would serve the Empire, their harsh world becoming a training ground for Zephyrian soldiers. Their strength, whatever it might be, would serve Zephyrian interests. In Detention Cell 7, Jake Morrison sat on a metal bench, studying his surroundings with calm interest. The cell was clean, well lit, and maintained, at a comfortable temperature. The gravity felt normal, maybe a little light compared to Earth standard. The air was breathable, though it tasted slightly metallic. Jake had been in worse places. The mining platforms in the asteroid belt were cramped, dangerous, and filled with equipment that could kill a man in dozens of creative ways. This alien prison was almost comfortable by comparison. He wondered what his captors wanted. They hadn't hurt him, hadn't even asked him any questions yet. Maybe they were still figuring out how to communicate. Jake had picked up a few alien languages during his time in space, but these beings spoke something entirely new. The human stretched out on the bench and closed his eyes. Whatever came next, he would face it when it arrived. No point worrying about things beyond his control. That was a lesson he had learned growing up in Detroit, refined during his time in the Marines, and perfected while working the dangerous Outer Rim mining operations. Jake Morrison was ready for whatever his alien captors had planned. Veltar walked through the ship's corridors toward Detention Cell 7, feeling nervous about his first real interrogation. His father expected results, and failure was not acceptable in the Kethvar family. The young officer had studied the standard procedures, reviewed successful interrogations from the past, and prepared himself mentally for what was to come. The detention level was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. 2 guards stood outside Cell 7, their energy weapons ready. They stepped aside as Veltar approached, showing proper respect for the general's son. "Has the creature caused any trouble?" Veltar asked. "No, sir," replied the first guard. "It has been quiet. The human ate the food we provided and seemed to sleep for several hours. It appears calm." Veltar nodded and activated the cell door. The metal barrier slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the human sitting on the metal bench. Jake Morrison looked up as the alien officer entered, his expression curious but not afraid. "Good morning," Jake said in basic galactic standard, the common language used for trade between species. His accent was strange, but the words were clear. Veltar was surprised. Most primitive species took days or weeks to learn even simple phrases in galactic standard. This human had picked up enough to communicate after only 1 day in captivity. "You speak our language," Veltar observed, taking a position near the cell door. He kept his forearms relaxed but ready, following training protocols for dealing with potentially dangerous prisoners. "I speak a little," Jake replied. "Had to learn some basics for trading with the alien merchants who come through the asteroid belt. You folks have a nice ship here, very clean, good temperature control." The casual tone bothered Veltar. The human should be frightened, desperate, pleading for mercy. Instead, Jake Morrison acted like he was making conversation with a neighbor. "You are a prisoner of the Zephyrian Empire," Veltar said, trying to establish the seriousness of the situation. "Your fate depends on how well you cooperate with our questions." "Sure," I figured something like that, Jake said, leaning back against the wall. What do you want to know? The easy agreement threw Veltar off balance. He had expected resistance, demands to be released, threats about human retaliation. Instead, the prisoner seemed ready to chat about whatever topics came up. Tell me about Earth's military forces, Veltar began, following the standard interrogation outline. Jake scratched his chin, thinking, well, we've got armies, navies, air forces, space forces now too. Different countries have different setups. The Americans have the biggest space presence, but the Chinese and Europeans are catching up fast. How many soldiers does your species maintain? Total? Maybe 50 million active duty across all the countries and services. Hard to say exactly since everyone counts different things. Veltar made notes on his datapad. 50 million soldiers seemed like a large number for a single planet. The entire Zephyrian Empire maintained only 20 million troops across dozens of worlds. What weapons do these forces possess? Jake shrugged. Rifles, rockets, tanks, fighters, ships, bombs, nuclear weapons, though most folks try not to think about those too much. The usual stuff, I guess. Nuclear weapons? Veltar had read about atomic energy in the intelligence reports. Most species avoided such dangerous technology. Yeah, we've had those for almost a century now. Nasty things. Used them twice in a war back in the 1940s. Decided they were too destructive for regular use. Still got thousands of them, though, just in case. The casual way Jake discussed weapons capable of destroying cities made Veltar uncomfortable. The human talked about nuclear arms the way most people discussed farming tools. You said this technology is too destructive, yet your species continues to build these weapons? Jake nodded. Well, yeah, you never know what might happen. Better to have them and not need them than need them and not have them. That's what my dad always said about tools. Veltar decided to try a different approach. He activated the cell's environmental controls, raising the temperature by 10 degrees and increasing humidity. Most species found such changes uncomfortable and distracting. Jake didn't seem to notice. Tell me about your work in the asteroid belt, Veltar continued. Mining operation. I run the heavy equipment, break up rocks, extract metals and rare minerals. It's decent work, pays well, but it's tough on the equipment. Those asteroids don't break easy, and the vacuum plays hell with mechanical systems. Is it dangerous work? Sure, equipment failures can kill you real fast out there. No air, extreme temperatures, radiation exposure. Had a buddy lose his whole crew when their habitat module failed. Took 3 days for rescue to arrive. Jake said this like he was discussing the weather. Veltar increased the temperature another 5 degrees and added a low-frequency sound that usually caused anxiety in most species. The conditions you describe would be fatal to most beings, Veltar said. Yeah, space is not friendly to humans, but neither is a lot of Earth when you think about it. I grew up in Detroit, worked construction in Alaska, did 2 tours with the Marines in some pretty nasty places. You learn to deal with whatever environment you find yourself in. You were a soldier? 4 years active duty, 3 years reserves. Infantry mostly, some demolition training. Did peacekeeping work in Africa, fought insurgents in the Middle East. Nothing too exciting. Veltar made more notes. The human discussed military service the way most people talked about attending school. As if combat was just another job that needed doing. How many beings did you kill during this service? Jake was quiet for a moment, his expression becoming more serious. That's not really the kind of thing you keep count of. War is messy, confusing. Sometimes you shoot at people. Sometimes they shoot back. Sometimes people don't go home. The simple way Jake described warfare disturbed Veltar more than boasting would have. The human wasn't proud of killing, but he wasn't haunted by it either. He treated it like an unfortunate but necessary part of his job. Veltar increased the cell's gravity by 20% and dimmed the lights. These changes should have made the prisoner feel weak and disoriented. Is something wrong with your environmental systems? Jake asked, looking around the cell with interest. The gravity feels a bit heavy now, kind of like when I worked the deep mines back home, and the lighting reminds me of the night shift at the factory. The environmental stress that should have weakened the human only reminded him of previous experiences. Veltar was beginning to understand why other species spoke of Earth as a death world. If humans considered these conditions normal, what kind of environment had shaped them? "Tell me more about Earth," Veltar said. Jake smiled, seeming to relax. "Beautiful planet, lots of variety, mountains, oceans, deserts, forests, tundra. Weather can be rough sometimes. We get hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, floods, droughts, earthquakes, volcanoes. Keeps life interesting." He listed natural disasters like vacation destinations. Veltar realized that his interrogation was not going according to plan. The human wasn't breaking under pressure because he didn't recognize the environmental changes as pressure. To Jake Morrison, this was just another day in conditions he found familiar and manageable. Veltar would have to try different methods. Veltar stood before his father's desk, trying to maintain his composure as he delivered his report. General Kethvar's black eyes studied the datapad with growing irritation, his forearms moving restlessly as he read through the interrogation. "Notes. 3 days, and this is all you have learned?" Kethvar's voice carried the cold edge that preceded punishment. "Basic military information that any scout could have observed from orbit?" "Father, the human is not responding to standard pressure techniques. Environmental stress seems to have no effect on it. The creature treats combat conditions as normal conversation topics. You are making excuses for your failure." Kethvar stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow across the desk. "Perhaps you lack the proper understanding of how interrogation works. I have followed all protocols exactly as taught. The human simply does not react the way other species do." Kethvar walked around the desk to face his son directly. "Then you will observe while I demonstrate the correct methods. We will go to the detention level together, and I will show you how a real officer extracts information from prisoners." Veltar felt his stomach tighten with worry. His father's demonstrations were usually harsh and final. "Father, perhaps we should consider that the human might be telling the truth about its species' capabilities." "The truth?" Kethvar laughed harshly. "The truth is that you have been fooled by primitive psychology. This creature is playing games with you, pretending to be stronger than it is. I will break that illusion quickly." They walked through the ship's corridors together, the general's confident stride contrasting with his son's reluctant steps. Other crew members moved aside respectfully as they passed, all of them familiar with Kethvar's reputation for harsh discipline. At Detention Cell 7, Kethvar dismissed the guards and entered the cell with Veltar following behind. Jake Morrison looked up from where he sat reading a datapad that someone had provided. The human's calm expression didn't change when he saw the larger alien enter. "Good afternoon," Jake said politely. "You must be the boss around here." Kethvar studied the human carefully. The creature was smaller than he had expected, built more compactly than most sentient species. Its skin was pale, its hair brown, and its eyes were an unusual blue color. Nothing about its appearance suggested special strength or dangerous capabilities. "I am General Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire. You will answer my questions completely and honestly." "Sure thing, General. What would you like to know?" The easy agreement annoyed Kethvar as much as it had bothered his son. He activated the cell's controls, dropping the temperature by 30 degrees and increasing the gravity to twice normal. The changes happened gradually, designed to create maximum discomfort without causing immediate harm. Jake set down his data pad and looked around with interest. "Getting a bit chilly in here. Feels like winter back in Minnesota. My dad used to take me ice fishing in weather like this." Kethvar increased the environmental stress further. The temperature dropped another 20 degrees, the gravity increased to 3 times normal, and he introduced trace amounts of toxic gases into the air supply. These conditions would incapacitate most species within minutes. "How many ships does Earth's military possess?" Kethvar asked. Jake thought for a moment, seemingly unbothered by the harsh conditions. "Hard to say exactly. The major powers probably have a few thousand space-capable vessels between them. Most are small patrol boats or cargo haulers with some weapons bolted on. We're still pretty new to the space warfare game." What about planetary defenses? Orbital platforms around the major population centers, ground-based missile systems, fighter squadrons on most colonies. Nothing too fancy, but enough to discourage pirates and raiders. Kethvar made the gravity even stronger and introduced electromagnetic fields designed to cause neurological disruption. He watched carefully for signs of distress, but the human continued talking in the same casual tone. The thing is, General, most of our military planning still focuses on fighting each other rather than alien threats. Humans have been at war with other humans for pretty much all of recorded history. We know how to fight ourselves really well, but we're still figuring out how to fight you folks. Your species fights among itself constantly? Oh yeah. We've got it down to a science. World wars, regional conflicts, civil wars, tribal fighting, you name it. Someone's always fighting someone else somewhere on Earth. It's kind of our thing. Kethvar found this information disturbing rather than encouraging. Species that fought constantly among themselves usually developed extremely effective military technologies and tactics, but he pushed these thoughts aside and focused on breaking the prisoner. He activated sonic weapons built into the cell walls, filling the air with frequencies designed to cause pain and confusion. The sound would normally drive most prisoners to their knees within seconds. Jake winced slightly and rubbed his ears. That's pretty loud. Reminds me of working next to the hydraulic presses at the steel mill. You might want to get your audio systems checked, though. There's a weird harmonic that sounds like mechanical failure. The general stared at the human in disbelief. Conditions that would kill most aliens were merely reminding this creature of previous work experiences. He decided to try direct physical intimidation instead. Kethvar moved closer to Jake, using his superior height and forearms to create a threatening presence. You will tell me the location of Earth's military headquarters, or you will experience pain beyond your imagination. Jake looked up at the large alien without flinching. Well, that depends on which military you're asking about. The Americans have the Pentagon, the Russians have their defense ministry in Moscow, the Chinese have their setup in Beijing. There's no single headquarters for the whole planet. You dare to give me incomplete answers? Kethvar reached out with one of his arms, intending to grab the human and demonstrate the consequences of defiance. Jake moved faster than Veltar thought possible. The human caught the general's arm, twisted it in a way that used the alien's own strength against him, and suddenly Kethvar found himself off balance and in pain. Easy there, General, Jake said calmly, releasing the arm before any real damage was done. I'm trying to cooperate here. No need to get physical. Kethvar staggered backward, shocked by the speed and efficiency of the human's defensive move. The creature hadn't attacked exactly, but had demonstrated that it could have caused serious injury if it had chosen to. You attacked me, Kethvar said, his voice tight with anger and surprise. No, sir, I defended myself. There's a difference. Where I come from, grabbing someone without permission is considered rude. I just encouraged you to keep your hands to yourself. Veltar watched this exchange with growing alarm. His father, one of the most feared warriors in the Zephyrian military, had just been casually handled by a prisoner who claimed to be a simple miner. How did you move so quickly? Kethvar demanded. Jake shrugged. Basic training stuff. Marines learn hand-to-hand combat, and working dangerous jobs keeps you alert. You develop fast reflexes when your life depends on reacting quickly to threats. What? Threats? Equipment failures, structural collapses, toxic gas leaks, fires, explosions, cave-ins. Construction and mining work can kill you in dozens of ways if you're not paying attention. Military training just adds a few more ways to die to the list. Jake sat back down on the bench and picked up his datapad again. Is there anything else you'd like to know, General? I've got time. Kethvar left the cell without another word, his son following quickly behind. In the corridor, the general turned to face Veltar with confusion and anger written across his features. What kind of creature moves like that? He asked. I tried to warn you, Father. The human is not like other species we have encountered. Kethvar was quiet for a long moment, thinking through what he had just experienced. Finally, he spoke again. Tomorrow we will place the creature in combat trials. Physical tests will reveal its true capabilities. Veltar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. His father's pride was leading them into dangerous territory, and he was beginning to suspect that the human named Jake Morrison was far more dangerous than anyone realized. Veltar sat alone in his quarters, staring at the intelligence files spread across his desk. After witnessing his father's confrontation with the human prisoner, he had requested every available report about Earth and its inhabitants. What he was reading made his blood run cold. The scientific surveys painted a picture of a world that should have been uninhabitable. Earth's gravity was significantly stronger than most habitable planets. Its weather patterns included massive storms that could level cities. The planet's surface was constantly reshaped by earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and extreme temperature variations. Yet somehow, humans not only survived in these conditions, but had spread across their entire world and begun expanding into space. Veltar opened a file about human military history and immediately wished he hadn't. The document contained thousands of years of warfare, each conflict more brutal than the last. Humans had developed weapons specifically designed to kill other humans with maximum efficiency. They had fought wars that lasted decades, conflicts that killed millions, and battles where soldiers continued fighting with fatal wounds. One report described a human military unit that had held a position against impossible odds for weeks, fighting even after most of their members were dead or wounded. Another detailed human soldiers who had walked across frozen wasteland for hundreds of miles, many of them dying along the way, just to continue a battle. The young officer found records of human entertainment that confused and terrified him. Humans watched other humans fight each other for sport. They competed in activities that simulated combat, often resulting in serious injuries. They climbed mountains, swam in dangerous waters, and jumped from aircraft for recreation. What other species considered extreme survival training, humans called fun. Veltar activated his communication system and contacted the ship's medical officer. "Dr. Zith, I need information about the human prisoner's physical capabilities." "Ah yes, the Deathworlder," came the reply. "I performed a basic medical scan when it arrived. Most interesting specimen." "What did you find?" "Its bone density is 40% higher than our own. Muscle fiber composition suggests strength levels equivalent to our heavy labor class. Cardiovascular system designed for extreme stress and rapid recovery. Brain chemistry shows no signs of fear or stress reactions despite being held prisoner." "Could it be drugged or conditioned somehow?" "Negative. The creature appears to be operating under normal biological parameters for its species. What we see is simply how humans are built." Veltar ended the communication and returned to the intelligence files. He found a section about Earth's wildlife that made him understand why humans had evolved such extreme capabilities. The planet's ecosystem was built around predation and survival. Animals that could kill humans were common. Plants that could poison or trap unwary victims grew naturally. Humans had spent millions of years learning to survive in an environment where everything was trying to kill them. The door to his quarters chimed, and Veltar looked up to see his father entering without waiting for permission. General Kethvar's expression was dark, his movements showing suppressed anger. "Have you learned anything useful from your research?" Kethvar asked. "Father, I think we should reconsider our approach to the human prisoner." "Reconsider?" "The creature humiliated me in front of my own son. There will be no reconsideration until I have proven Zephyrian superiority." Veltar gestured to the files on his desk. "The intelligence report suggests that humans are far more dangerous than we initially believed. Their entire species has been shaped by constant warfare and extreme environmental conditions." Kethvar picked up one of the data pads and scanned its contents quickly. "Primitive conflicts using crude weapons, these reports mean nothing. We have energy weapons, advanced armor, superior training. But father, look at these casualty figures. Humans routinely accept losses that would destroy the morale of any other military force. In some battles, they continued fighting with 90% casualties. Desperation, not strength. What about their expansion into space? They went from surface-bound to interstellar travel in less than a century. Most species take millennia to achieve such development." Kethvar set down the data pad with visible irritation. "Speed born of recklessness, not intelligence. They probably killed thousands of their own people learning to build spacecraft. Veltar found the file he was looking for and handed it to his father. Actually, they did. Early space exploration cost many lives, but they kept trying anyway. They built their space programs by accepting that people would die and continuing regardless. The general read through the report, his expression becoming more troubled with each page. The human space program had indeed been built on acceptable losses, with crews voluntarily undertaking missions they knew might kill them. This changes nothing, Kethavar said finally. Tomorrow the human will face combat trials. We will see how well its primitive conditioning serves against proper military opponents. Father, what if the human wins? It will not win. I have selected 3 of our most dangerous prisoners for the trial. A Kraxi berserker, a Thule assassin, and a Vorthon warrior. Each one is a killer trained from birth for combat. Veltar felt his worry increase. And if Morrison defeats them, then I will face the creature myself and end this foolishness once and for all. After his father left, Veltar continued reading the intelligence files with growing dread. He found psychological profiles of human soldiers that described their mental conditioning. Humans trained for war by breaking down their natural reluctance to kill other humans. They practiced scenarios designed to overcome normal survival instincts. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to regard death in combat as an acceptable outcome, rather than something to be avoided at all costs. Veltar opened a file about human, religious and cultural beliefs. He discovered that many human societies glorified warriors who died in battle. Some cultures considered death while fighting to be the highest honor a person could achieve. The young officer realized that his father was planning to face a creature that had been bred, trained, and culturally conditioned to view combat as a natural state of existence. Jake Morrison wasn't just a miner who had received some military training. He was a product of a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning to kill and survive. Veltar tried to contact his father to share these new discoveries, but Kethavar had left orders not to be disturbed. The general was in his private training chamber, preparing for what he believed would be a simple demonstration of alien superiority over human weakness. In his cell, Jake Morrison was also preparing. The human had requested access to the ship's exercise facility and had spent hours working through combat drills that the Zephyrian guards found both impressive and terrifying. Jake's movements were precise, efficient, and deadly. When asked about his routine, Jake had simply said he was staying in shape. To him, preparing for potential combat was as natural as breathing. Veltar spent the night reading intelligence reports and trying to find some weakness in human physiology or psychology that might give his father an advantage. He found none. Every human characteristic that might seem like a weakness turned out to be an adaptation for survival in extreme conditions. As morning approached, Veltar realized that his father was about to face a test he might not survive. The human named Jake Morrison wasn't just another primitive alien. He was a perfect killing machine shaped by the harshest planet in known space. The combat trials would begin in a few hours, and Veltar was beginning to understand that his father's pride might cost more than either of them was prepared to pay. The combat arena deep within the Crimson Talon buzzed with excitement as crew members gathered to watch the spectacle. General Kethavar had announced that the human prisoner would face 3 of the Empire's most dangerous criminals in gladiatorial combat. The entire ship's company saw this as entertainment, a chance to watch their general prove alien superiority over the primitive Deathworlder. Veltar stood beside his father in the viewing gallery, his stomach tight with worry. Below them, the circular arena was 20 meters across, surrounded by energy barriers that would contain the violence about to unfold. Medical teams waited nearby, though Kethavar had made it clear they were only there for the alien fighters. "You still look concerned, my son," Kethavar observed, his forearms clasped behind his back. "This demonstration will cure you of any foolish notions about human capabilities." "Father, I spent the night reviewing intelligence reports. Humans are not like other species we have encountered. Their entire evolutionary history has been shaped by constant warfare and environmental threats, psychology and theory." Kethavar dismissed with a wave of one hand. "Combat reveals truth. Within minutes, we will see this creature broken and begging for mercy. The arena doors opened, and the first fighter emerged. The Craxi Berserker was 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor plates, and equipped with razor-sharp claws that could cut through steel. Its species was known throughout the galaxy for mindless aggression and incredible physical strength. This particular specimen had killed 17 beings in previous arena matches. The crowd cheered as the massive creature stomped into the center of the arena, roaring its challenge to the empty air. Its 6 arms flexed and stretched, showing muscles that could snap bones like twigs. From the opposite entrance, Jake Morrison walked calmly into the arena. The human looked tiny compared to his opponent, carrying no weapons and wearing only the simple prison clothes provided by his captors. The contrast between the massive alien warrior and the compact human drew laughter from the watching crew. Members, the creature looks afraid, one officer commented loudly. Veltar studied Jake's face carefully through the viewing screen magnification. The human didn't look afraid. He looked focused, alert, like a professional evaluating a job that needed to be done. Begin, Kethvar commanded. The Craxi Berserker charged immediately, its massive frame thundering across the arena floor. Most opponents would have tried to run or dodge, hoping to avoid the creature's devastating initial attack. Jake Morrison ran straight toward the charging alien. At the last possible moment, the human dropped low and rolled between the Berserker's legs, coming up behind the massive creature with fluid grace. Before the Craxi could turn around, Jake had grabbed one of its rear legs and twisted with mechanical precision. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the arena. The Berserker crashed to the ground, roaring in pain and confusion. It tried to rise, but Jake was already moving again, staying close to avoid the creature's claws while targeting joints and pressure points with surgical accuracy. Within 30 seconds, the fight was over. The Craxi Berserker lay motionless, its neck broken by a move so quick that most of the spectators missed exactly how it happened. The arena fell silent. Jake stood up slowly, breathing only slightly harder than normal, and looked toward the viewing gallery with calm eyes. "Send in the next one," he called out, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. Kethavar's jaw tightened. "Release the Thule assassin." The second fighter entered the arena like a shadow, its natural camouflage making it nearly invisible against the metal walls. Thule assassins were legendary for their stealth abilities and use of poison weapons. This one carried crystalline blades that could kill with a single cut. Jake watched the empty-seeming arena carefully, his head turning as he tracked movements that others couldn't see. When the assassin finally struck, moving with liquid speed, from behind, the human was already turning to meet the attack. The two fighters became a blur of motion, the Thule's invisibility useless against Jake's uncanny ability to predict where attacks would come from. The human moved like water, flowing around strikes that should have killed him while delivering precise counterattacks that gradually wore down his opponent. The Thule assassin was faster than the Berserker had been, but Jake fought with the patience of someone accustomed to long, grinding conflicts. He didn't try to match his opponent's speed. Instead, he controlled distance and timing until the alien made a fatal mistake. When the assassin overextended on a poison blade thrust, Jake caught its arm and used leverage to send the creature crashing into the arena wall. The impact was hard, enough to crack the metal plating. The Thule didn't get up. "Impossible," someone whispered from the viewing gallery. Jake looked up again, still calm, still ready. "One more?" Kethvar's hands clenched into fists. "Release the Vorthon." The third fighter was different from the others. Vorthon warriors were known for their intelligence as much as their physical capabilities. This one carried advanced weapons and wore partial armor, confident in its ability to outthink as well as outfight any opponent. The Vorthon entered the arena cautiously, studying Jake with calculating eyes. Unlike the others, it didn't charge immediately. Instead, it circled slowly, looking for weaknesses and testing the human's reactions with feints and probing attacks. Jake mirrored the alien's movements, equally patient, equally calculating. The two fighters studied each other like chess masters, planning their strategies. "The human shows intelligence," Veltar observed quietly. "Animal cunning," his father replied. But there was uncertainty in his voice now. When the real fight began, it was a display of tactical brilliance from both participants. The Vorthon used its weapons and armor effectively, forcing Jake to adapt, constantly. But the human's adaptability seemed limitless. Every strategy the alien tried, Jake found a counter for. The turning point came when the Vorthon attempted a complex combination attack, using its energy weapon to pin Jake in position, while moving in for a killing blow with its blade. It was a perfect tactical sequence that should have been impossible to escape. Jake did something that defied tactical logic. Instead of trying to avoid the energy weapon, he moved directly into its path, using his body to absorb damage that would have incapacitated most beings, while simultaneously closing distance for a devastating counterattack. The human's willingness to accept serious injury in order to create an opening shocked everyone watching. By the time the Vorthon realized what was happening, Jake's hands were around its throat. The fight ended with a sound like breaking sticks. Jake stood over his third defeated opponent, bleeding from energy burns but still functional. He looked up at the viewing gallery where General Kethvar stood frozen in disbelief. "Are we done here?" Jake asked. The arena remained completely silent for a long moment. 3 of the Empire's most dangerous fighters lay dead, killed by a creature that most of the crew had considered primitive and harmless. Finally, Kethvar activated the communication system. Guards escort the prisoner back to its cell. As Jake was led away, the general turned to face his son. Veltar could see confusion and something approaching fear in his father's eyes. The creature fought with no regard for its own survival. Kethvar said quietly, "What kind of beings willingly accept injury to defeat their enemies?" "Humans, father." "That's what I was trying to tell you." Kethvar was quiet for a long time, staring down at the 3 bodies in the arena. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a hardness that Veltar had never heard before. "Tomorrow I will face the human myself. This mockery of Zephyrian military superiority ends now." Veltar felt ice in his veins. His father's pride was driving them toward a confrontation that could only end in disaster. The human had just demonstrated capabilities that went beyond physical strength or combat training. Jake Morrison fought with the calculated ruthlessness of a species that viewed warfare as a natural state of existence. "Father, perhaps we should consider other options." "There are no other options. The human has challenged our authority by defeating our warriors. I will restore the Empire's honor, or I will die trying." As the crew dispersed and the bodies were removed from the arena, Veltar remained in the viewing gallery, staring at the blood-stained floor below. His father was about to face a creature that had just proven itself capable of defeating any opponent through sheer willingness to pay whatever price victory required. The young officer was beginning to understand that humans didn't just survive on their death world. They thrived there because they had become something more dangerous than any natural predator. They had become perfectly adapted killers. Veltar found his father in the ship's personal training chamber, going through combat drills with mechanical precision. General Kethvar's 4 arms moved in complex patterns, practicing strikes and blocks that had been perfected over decades of military service. Sweat gleamed on his purple skin despite the chamber's cool temperature. "Father, we need to talk about what happened in the arena." Kethvar continued his exercises without pausing. What happened was a demonstration of alien trickery. The human fought without honor, accepting injuries that any rational being would avoid. That wasn't trickery. That was tactical thinking. Morrison evaluated each opponent and found ways to defeat them using minimal resources. He threw his life away 3 times over. Any of those wounds could have been fatal. Veltar moved closer, watching his father's increasingly aggressive movements. But they weren't fatal. The human calculated risks and accepted necessary damage to achieve victory. That's not recklessness. That's a completely different approach to combat. Kethvar finally stopped his exercises and turned to face his son. Different. It was primitive. Civilized beings fight with strategy and honor. We don't sacrifice ourselves needlessly. What if it's not needless? What if humans have learned that accepting damage is sometimes the most effective path to victory? Then, they are fools who will die quickly when faced with superior opponents. Veltar held up a datapad containing more intelligence reports. I've been studying their military history all night. Humans have won countless battles by accepting casualties that other species would consider defeat. They call it acceptable losses. Show me. Veltar activated the display, showing battlefield reports from various human conflicts. This battle involved human soldiers holding a position against 10 times their number. They knew they would probably die, but their sacrifice allowed other forces to achieve strategic objectives. Kethvar studied the report with growing confusion. They chose to die for tactical advantage? Not chose to die exactly. Chose to risk death for greater gain. And here, Veltar switched to another file. Human pilots intentionally crashed their aircraft into enemy ships when conventional weapons failed. They called it ramming speed. Suicide attacks are not unknown. Desperate species sometimes resort to such tactics. Father, this wasn't desperation. This was doctrine. Humans routinely train for scenarios where death is an acceptable outcome, if it serves their strategic goals. Kethvar set down the datapad, his expression troubled. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that when you face Morrison tomorrow, you will be fighting someone who has been culturally and psychologically conditioned to view his own death as less important than achieving his objectives. And what objectives could the creature have? It is a prisoner on an alien ship, facing execution regardless of the outcome. Veltar was quiet for a moment, considering possibilities that made his blood run cold. What if his objective is simply to prove that humans cannot be easily defeated? What if he sees this as representing his entire species? Kethvar began his exercises again, his movements more violent than before. Then he will die as a representative of his species, and we will learn the limits of human endurance. Father, please reconsider this course of action. The arena battles prove that Morrison is far more dangerous than we anticipated. The arena battles proved that he can defeat unprepared opponents through trickery and desperation. I am neither unprepared nor susceptible to such tactics. Veltar watched his father's training routine with growing alarm. Kethvar was preparing for a conventional duel between military officers, complete with formal rules and honorable conduct. He was not preparing to face someone who might view the entire concept of honorable combat as a tactical disadvantage. What rules will govern the fight? Veltar asked. Standard combat protocols. No weapons beyond what we carry naturally. Victory by death or surrender. Clean, decisive, honorable. And if Morrison doesn't follow those rules? Kethvar stopped. His exercises again, his black eyes focusing intently on his son. What do you mean? Humans don't seem to share our concepts of honor in combat. Morrison might use tactics that we would consider dishonorable or unsporting, such as? Veltar pulled up more files on his datapad. Psychological warfare, environmental manipulation, fighting beyond what we would consider reasonable injury, limits. Human military training includes courses on how to gain advantage through any means necessary. You are suggesting that the creature will cheat. I'm suggesting that the creature might not recognize our rules as valid. To humans, the only rule in combat might be survival and victory. Kethvar resumed his training with increased intensity. Then I will demonstrate that honor and discipline triumph over primitive savagery. Veltar left the training chamber feeling more worried than ever. His father was preparing for a formal duel while the human was probably preparing for war. The mismatch in expectations could prove fatal. In detention cell 7, Jake Morrison sat quietly on his bench, thinking through the events of the past few days. The arena battles had been more challenging than he had expected, but manageable, within the scope of his training and experience. Each opponent had presented different problems requiring different solutions. The Craxi Berserker had been pure aggression and strength, defeated by targeting structural weaknesses in its anatomy. The Thule Assassin had relied on stealth and speed, overcome by patience and predictive positioning. The Vorthan Warrior had been the most dangerous because it could think tactically, but it had been trained in conventional combat theory that Jake could exploit. Tomorrow's fight would be different. General Kethvar was the leader of this military force, which meant he would be both skilled and experienced. More importantly, He would be fighting for personal and professional reasons rather than simple survival. Jake had recognized the emotional dynamics at play during his interrogations. The young officer, Veltar, was intelligent and beginning to understand the true nature of human capabilities. The general was proud, traditional, and committed to proving his superiority regardless of evidence to the contrary. This combination suggested that tomorrow's encounter would be as much about psychology as physical combat. Jake would need to be prepared for an opponent who was fighting not just to win, but to maintain his entire worldview. The human stood up and began working through his own exercise routine. Unlike the general's formal training patterns, Jake's movements were practical and efficient. He practiced techniques for fighting larger opponents, methods for using an enemy's strength against them, and ways to continue fighting with various types of injuries. He also spent time thinking through the tactical situation beyond the immediate combat. Win or lose, this fight would send a message about human capabilities to the alien crew. How he conducted himself could influence their species' future interactions with humanity. Jake had never considered himself a diplomat or representative of his people. He was just a miner who had ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But circumstances had made him the first human many of these aliens had ever encountered. That responsibility weighed on him as he prepared for what might be his final battle. In his quarters, Veltar continued reading intelligence reports about human psychology and military doctrine. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that his father was walking into a trap of his own making. Humans, it seemed, had spent their entire existence learning to fight opponents who were bigger, stronger, and better equipped than they were. They had developed strategies for defeating superior forces through superior tactics, better preparation, and willingness to pay prices that other species wouldn't accept. General Kethavar was about to discover that being the bigger, stronger opponent wasn't always an advantage when facing someone who had learned to turn such advantages into weaknesses. The young officer tried once more to contact his father, but Kethavar had locked his training chamber and left orders not to be disturbed. He was spending the night preparing to prove Zephyrian military superiority over human primitiveness. By morning, one of them would be proven right. Veltar just prayed it wouldn't cost his father's life. The arena was filled to capacity as General Kethavar descended to the combat floor. The entire crew of the Crimson Talon had gathered to watch their commander restore Zephyrian honor after the humans' victories the previous day. Officers stood at attention in the viewing galleries while enlisted personnel crowded around display screens throughout the ship. Veltar stood alone in the command viewing area, his forearms gripping the railing as he watched his father prepare for combat. The general wore ceremonial armor that gleamed under the arena lights, his movements confident and controlled as he tested his weapons one final time. Across the arena, Jake Morrison entered through the prisoner's gate. The human still wore simple, prison clothes and carried no weapons. His face showed the same calm focus that had preceded his previous fights, but Veltar thought he detected something different in the human's eyes. This wasn't just another survival challenge, this was something more significant. Citizens of the Empire, Kethavar's voice boomed through the arena's communication system. Today, we restore the natural order. This primitive creature has defeated our prisoners through trickery and desperation, but it has never faced a true warrior of Zephyr. The crowd cheered enthusiastically, their confidence in their general's victory absolute. Only Veltar remained silent, his stomach tight with worry as he watched the two fighters size each other up across the metal floor. Jake looked up toward the viewing galleries, his blue eyes finding Veltar's position with unsettling accuracy. The human nodded once, a gesture that somehow conveyed both respect and regret. Then he turned his attention to General Kethavar. "Shall we begin, General?" Jake asked, his voice carrying clearly in the arena's acoustics. "We shall end this mockery of combat," Kethavar replied, raising his ceremonial sword. "Prepare to face a true warrior." "I've been fighting true warriors my whole life," Jake said quietly. "You're just the biggest one yet." The words carried no boast or challenge, just simple statement of fact. Somehow that made them more unnerving than any threat could have been. Kethavar charged across the arena, his sword held high and his war cry echoing from the walls. His approach was textbook military doctrine, aggressive, direct, designed to overwhelm an opponent through superior strength and skill. Jake Morrison did not try to avoid the charge. Instead, he moved to meet it, closing distance in a way that turned the general's momentum into a weapon against him. At the moment of contact, the human twisted aside and used Kethvar's own force to send him crashing into the arena wall. The impact was tremendous. Metal plating buckled under the force of the general's collision, and his ceremonial sword clattered across the floor. The crowd's cheering died into shocked silence as their invincible commander struggled to regain his footing. "Physics, General," Jake said as he retrieved the fallen sword and tossed it back toward Kethvar. "Mass times velocity equals momentum. Use your enemy's strength against them." Kethvar snarled and grabbed his weapon, launching another attack. This time he was more cautious, using his superior reach and multiple arms to keep Jake at a distance, while delivering precise strikes. But Jake fought like water, flowing around attacks that should have connected, appearing in positions where the general's advantages became disadvantages. Every technique Kethvar employed, the human seemed to have a counter for. The fight continued for several minutes, with the general becoming increasingly frustrated as his opponent refused to behave according to conventional combat theory. Jake didn't fight like a warrior trained in formal techniques. He fought like someone who had learned that rules were optional and victory was everything. The turning point came when Kethvar attempted a complex combination attack using all four of his arms simultaneously. It was a maneuver that had defeated countless opponents in the past, creating a web of strikes that should have been impossible to escape. Jake did something that violated every principle of self-preservation that Veltar understood. Instead of trying to block or avoid the attack, the human deliberately moved into it, accepting wounds that would have incapacitated most beings, while simultaneously positioning himself for a devastating counterattack. By the time Kethvar realized what was happening, Jake's hands were locked around the general's throat in a grip that could not be broken. "Yield," Jake said quietly, his voice carrying no malice or satisfaction. Kethvar's response was to attempt one final attack, trying to drive his sword into the human's body even as consciousness faded from his eyes. Jake Morrison broke general Kethvar's neck with surgical precision. The arena fell into absolute silence. The most feared warrior in the Zephyrian Empire lay motionless on the metal floor, defeated by a creature that most of them had considered primitive only days before. Jake stood slowly, bleeding from multiple wounds, but still functional. He looked down at the general's body for a moment, then up toward the viewing galleries where hundreds of alien faces stared at him in shock and terror. "I'm sorry it came to this," he said, his words carrying to every corner of the arena through the communication system. "Your general was a brave warrior, but he made the mistake of thinking that formal training was the same thing as practical experience." Veltar stared down at his father's broken body, feeling something fundamental shift in his understanding of the universe. The human had just demonstrated that everything the Zephyrian military believed about combat, honor, and superiority was based on assumptions that didn't apply to truly dangerous opponents. Security forces surrounded Jake Morrison and escorted him back to his cell, but their movements showed a respect that hadn't been there before. The human had proven that he could kill any of them if circumstances required it. Over the following days, as the ship traveled back toward Zephyrian space, Veltar found himself changed by what he had witnessed. Sleep came only in fragments, interrupted by dreams of his father's death and nightmares about what would happen when humanity decided to expand beyond their borders. He filed detailed reports about human capabilities, but the military command dismissed them as the exaggerated accounts of a traumatized officer. How could a primitive species from a single world pose a threat to an empire that spanned dozens of star systems? Veltar knew better. He had seen the casual efficiency with which Jake Morrison killed 3 trained fighters and then defeated the most skilled warrior in the Zephyrian military. More importantly, he had read the intelligence reports about human history and psychology. Jake Morrison wasn't exceptional among his species. He was typical. Every human was the product of an evolutionary environment that had taught them to view combat as a normal part of existence. Every human had been shaped by a culture that glorified warriors, and accepted casualty rates that other species would consider genocidal. If one human could devastate the crew of a military flagship, what would happen when humans arrived in organized military formations? The question haunted Veltar as the ship approached the home system. He requested an audience with the High Council, hoping to convince them that the Empire needed to reconsider its approach to humanity before it was too late. But even as he prepared his testimony, Veltar knew that his father's pride and blindness lived on in the Imperial leadership. They would not believe warnings about human danger until it was demonstrated in ways they could not dismiss. By then, it might be too late for the Zephyrian Empire to avoid the consequences of awakening Earth's sleeping giants. In his cell, Jake Morrison waited patiently for whatever came next. He had done what circumstances required, but he took no satisfaction in General Kethvar's death. The alien had been a product of his culture and training, just as Jake was a product of his own background. The human understood that this encounter was just the beginning. Word would spread about what had happened aboard the Crimson Talon. Other species would hear about the Deathworlder who had killed a Zephyrian general in single combat. Some would be smart enough to seek peaceful relations with humanity. Others would see it as a challenge that required response. Jake Morrison hoped that wiser minds would prevail, but his experience with both human and alien nature suggested that wisdom was often the rarest commodity in the universe. The galaxy was about to learn what humans already knew, that sometimes the most dangerous predators were the ones that looked harmless, until you gave them a reason to show their teeth. 6 months after the death of General Kethvar, Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the human transport ship Liberty's Edge, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport. The blue and white planet looked exactly as he remembered it. Beautiful, peaceful, and completely unaware of the galactic attention it was about to receive. The prisoner exchange had taken weeks to arrange. The Zephyrian Empire had been eager to return their dangerous captive to human space, while human diplomatic officials had been curious about Jake's experiences with alien military forces. Both sides had gotten what they wanted, though neither fully understood what they had actually exchanged. Jake's debriefing with human intelligence services had been thorough and enlightening. He learned that first contact protocols were still being developed, that humanity's space presence was smaller than he had told his captors, and that most human military planners were still preparing for conflicts with other humans rather than alien species. "Mr. Morrison," came a voice from behind him. Jake turned to see Commander Lisa Hayes, the intelligence officer who had been assigned as his liaison during the journey home. "We'll be docking at Luna Station in 3 hours. Your transport to Earth is already arranged." "Thank you, Commander. Any word on how the information I provided is being received?" Hayes joined him at the viewport, her expression thoughtful. "Mixed reactions. Some officials are concerned about the implications of alien contact. Others think you may have exaggerated the threat level during your captivity. And what do you think?" "I think we're not prepared for what's coming. Your descriptions of Zephyrian military capabilities suggest they could devastate our outer colonies if they chose to, but your account of their reaction to human combat methods is equally concerning." Jake nodded. "They're not used to fighting opponents who are willing to pay the price for victory. Most alien species seem to view casualties as something to be minimized rather than accepted as necessary. That could give us an advantage in the short term, but it also makes us look like dangerous primitives to the galactic community. Maybe we are dangerous primitives compared to them. The question is whether that's necessarily a bad thing." Meanwhile, in the heart of Zephyrian space, Veltar stood before the High Council of the Empire, delivering a testimony that none of them wanted to hear. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of worlds, their various alien forms creating a mosaic of colors and shapes in the amphitheater seating. "Honored counselors," Veltar began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was trying to communicate. "Humanity represents a threat unlike any we have previously encountered. They are not technologically superior to us, but they possess psychological and cultural advantages that make them extremely dangerous opponents." Elder Zixith, the Council's senior military advisor, gestured dismissively with one of his tentacles. "Subcommander, your father's death was regrettable, but it does not indicate a systemic threat. One prisoner defeating unprepared opponents proves nothing about their species' military potential. Respectfully, Elder, the human was not unprepared. Jake Morrison was a civilian miner with basic military training, yet he defeated our most skilled fighters through tactical thinking and willingness to accept damage that would incapacitate most beings. You describe a berserker mentality, not military sophistication. Veltar activated a holographic display showing human military statistics. This data suggests otherwise. Human forces routinely sustain casualty rates of 30 to 50% in major conflicts while maintaining unit cohesion and combat effectiveness. Most of our allied species consider 20% losses to be catastrophic defeat levels. Council member Kelnar leaned forward, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lights. Are you suggesting that humans are simply more resistant to death than other species? I'm suggesting that humans have a fundamentally different relationship with mortality in combat situations. They train for scenarios where death is an acceptable outcome if it serves strategic objectives. Suicide tactics are not unknown among desperate species. This isn't desperation, Counselor. It's doctrine. Humans have developed military strategies based on the assumption that soldiers will continue fighting with fatal wounds, that units will hold positions until completely destroyed, and that victory is worth almost any price. The chamber fell quiet as the implications of Veltar's words settled over the assembled representatives. Finally, Elder Zixith spoke again. Even if your assessment is accurate, humanity is confined to a single system with limited space-capable forces. They pose no immediate threat to the Empire. Veltar pulled up another display showing recent intelligence reports from the border regions. Honored Elder, that situation is changing rapidly. Human exploration fleets have been detected in 17 different systems over the past 6 months. Their expansion rate is accelerating. Exploration is not invasion. No, sir, but human historical patterns suggest that exploration is typically followed by colonization, which is often followed by territorial expansion. And given their approach to acceptable casualties in warfare, Veltar left the sentence unfinished, allowing the council members to draw their own conclusions about what human territorial expansion might mean for existing galactic powers. The debate continued for hours, with most council members arguing that humanity was too primitive and isolated to pose a real threat. A few, like Councillor Kelnar, expressed concern about the psychological profiles Veltar had compiled. In the end, the council voted to maintain current policy, monitoring human expansion but taking no direct action unless they entered Zephyrian territory. Veltar left the chamber knowing that his warnings had been heard but not truly understood. The Empire's leadership still thought in terms of conventional threats, superior technology, larger fleets, strategic resources. They didn't grasp that humans represented something different, a species that had learned to thrive in an environment where everything was trying to kill them. Back on Earth, Jake Morrison returned to his civilian life with surprising ease. The mining company welcomed him back. His friends treated his alien captivity as an interesting adventure, and life in the asteroid belt continued much as it had before. But Jake carried with him the knowledge of what was coming. He had seen the size and scope of galactic civilization, understood the military capabilities of species like the Zephyrians, and witnessed their reaction to human combat methods. During quiet moments between shifts, he found himself thinking about Veltar, the young alien officer who had tried to understand humanity rather than simply dominating it. Jake hoped there were others like him in the galactic community, beings who might choose cooperation over conquest. He also thought about the implications of first contact for his own species. Humanity had spent centuries learning to fight each other with ever-increasing efficiency. Now they would need to learn to fight opponents who were larger, stronger, and technologically superior. Jake was confident that humans would adapt to the challenge. They always did. The real question was whether the galaxy was prepared for what humanity would become once they understood the scope of the universe around them. 3 months later, human survey ships encountered Zephyrian patrol vessels near the edge of what both species considered their territorial space. The first meeting was peaceful, with both sides maintaining respectful distance while exchanging basic diplomatic communications. But intelligence officers on both sides were taking careful notes about ship designs, crew sizes, and tactical capabilities. The age of galactic innocence was ending, and both humans and aliens were beginning to prepare for whatever came next. Veltar, now serving as a special advisor on human affairs, read the contact reports with a mixture of hope and dread. Maybe peaceful coexistence was possible. Maybe his father's death had served some purpose by demonstrating the cost of underestimating humanity. Or maybe the galaxy was about to learn that the most dangerous species in the universe were the ones who had learned to see warfare as just. Another problem that needed solving. In the depths of space, human ships continued their expansion into the unknown, carrying crews who had been shaped by the harshest world in known space and trained by the most warlike species in the galaxy. The universe was about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object, and both sides were convinced that they were the unstoppable force. Jake Morrison returned to his mining operations, content in the knowledge that he had done his part. Whatever came next would be decided by people much smarter and more important than a simple miner from Detroit. But sometimes, the fate of civilizations rested in the hands of ordinary people who found themselves in extraordinary circumstances. And sometimes the most important battles were fought not between armies, but between different ways of understanding what it meant to survive in a dangerous universe. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see which philosophy would prove stronger: the alien belief in honor and minimized casualties, or the human conviction that victory was worth any price. History would remember this as the moment when everything changed.